Sharp as a sword thrust, the sound of a horn split the air. Bright and baneful was its voice, a shivering hot scream that made a man's bones seem to thrum within him. The cry lingered in the damp sea air.
The Black Priest pointed to one golden band. Here the horn is named. I am Dragonbinder. Hello and welcome to another episode of History of Westeros podcast, a podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book series, as well as HBO's Game of Thrones. Today, however, our episode is solely geared towards the book series, as the TV series hasn't reached this particular point yet. There are some minor The Winds of Winter spoilers, specifically an unreleased Victorian chapter.
Now, we're not getting into the heavy details of that chapter. We're borrowing a few things from it to make this episode. So if you're spoiler conscious, I wouldn't worry too much about it because the details we get are not particularly groundbreaking. They're not anything that's going to spoil you on any major plot line or even really any minor plot lines. It's just a few pieces of detail that we pulled that are really helpful for us to getting the picture on this horn. We're certainly not going to tell you anything about what happens when it blows. We don't know that as well as anybody else. So, but during our research for the Battle of Fire episode, which was our most recent one before this, we learned a lot about the dragon horn, and we've decided not to include that information in that episode because it was just too much of a tangent. We would have spent a quarter or a third of the episode just talking about the horn, and we really wanted to focus on the battle and Meereen itself, not the horn. So Dragonbinder gets its own episode.
So there aren't really a lot of magical items in the series. There are Valyrian steel blades, whose magic seems to be pretty simple. They're very sharp, they're very light, they look kind of cool sometimes.
They're pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they're straightforward. A common theme is that old powers are awakening, but there still aren't really magical items like rings and staves and wands. There's this dragon horn and another horn that we see that are, pretty magical, though. We probably don't need to provide you a lot of proof, though, that the horn is magical. You've read the book series yourself. I mean, I don't know what you think it's science happening here? It has glowing runes. Smoke is coming out of it. It killed the man who blew it. I mean, and it makes a terrifying, soul-churning sound, especially when Roy Dotrice says it.
That science cannot explain. A good example of the sound it makes is in the text, is a quote from Euron Greyjoy, also known as Damp Hair. Here's the rest of that quote. Okay, I can't sound like this horn. I don't have that technology, that science, that magic. But we do have the magic of counting. 4 lowercase a's, 2 capital R's, 4 capital E's, and 17 lowercase e's. All eyes turned toward the sound. It was one of Euron's mongrels winding the call, a monstrous man with a shaved head. Rings of gold and jade and jet glistened on his arms, and on his broad chest was a tattooed bird of prey, talons dripping blood. Now we have 4 lowercase a's, 3 capital R's, 4 lowercase e's, and 25 lowercase e's for the second sounding of the horn. The horn he blew was a shiny black and twisted, and taller than a man as he held it with both hands. It was bound about with bands of red gold and dark steel, incised with ancient Valyrian glyphs that seemed to glow redly as the sound swelled. Roy Dotrice does do an impression of the horn, so we'll go ahead and give you that much.
Yes. I decided to play it twice because it was pretty terrifying.
It was a terrible sound, a wall of pain and fury that seemed to burn the ears. Euron Damphair covered his and prayed for the drowned god to raise a mighty wave to smash the horn to silence. Yet still the shriek went on and on. "It is the horn of hell!" he wanted to scream, though no man would have heard him. The cheeks of the tattooed man were so puffed out that they looked about to burst, and the muscles in his chest twitched in a way that made it seem as if the bird were about to rip free of his flesh and take wing. And now the glyphs, shimmering with white fire, and on the sound went, echoing amongst the howling hills behind them and across the waters of Naga's cradle, to ring against the mountains of Great Wyke. On and on until it filled the whole wet world. And when it seemed the sound would never end, it did. The hornblower's breath failed at last. He staggered and almost fell. The priest saw Orkwood of Orkmont catch him by one arm to hold him up, whilst left-hand Lucas Codd took the twisted black horn from his hands. A thin wisp of smoke was rising from the horn, and the priest saw blood and blisters upon the lips of the man who'd sounded it. The bird on his chest was bleeding, too.
Now, Euron tells us that the man who blew the horn died and that a maester cut him open and found that his lungs were charred as black as soot. This is probably true. Mokoro also claims that the horn would kill whoever blew it. He doesn't go into detail about how it would kill them, but I don't know why Euron would make up how he died.
There'd have to be both of them would have to be lying.
Both of them would have to be lying about that. We didn't see the man die. Perhaps Euron could have told the lie about the hornblower's death to keep Victarion from blowing himself. Probably not. We just throw it out there. We like to throw out all the different ways to look at a thing.
But we're not standing behind that theory, but we did throw it out there. Yeah. Aeron's older brother, Victarion, also gives us a description of how the horn sounds. After Mokoro asks, have you ever heard it sound?
Victarion replies, once. The sound it made, it burned somehow, as if my bones were on fire, searing my flesh from within. Those writings glowed red hot, then white hot, and painful to look upon. It seemed as if the sound would never end. It was like some long scream, 1,000 screams, all melted into one.
I have a hard time imagining how awful something like that, this described like that, would sound in real life. It's just,
I don't know. Roy Dotrice was pretty terrifying right there, I think. Yeah.
It's a screaming sound, apparently, as opposed to what you would probably expect from a huge horn. Normally you'd expect, I guess, like a bass or a baritone kind of sound. But this is like a higher register, which is a bit unusual for such a big horn. Usually small horns like trombones and like trumpets and all those kinds of things make the higher pitch sounds like that. So science, once again, we're trying to apply to magic.
The fire and blood motif is very apparent. Victarion and Euron describe burning sensations, and they both note how the glyphs burn white hot, and the horn is seen to give off some smoke. And then blood was seen to come out of the hornblower's chest, as well as his lips. So, let's take a look at the horn itself.
Another quote. A twisted thing it was, 6 feet long from end to end, gleaming black and banded with red gold and dark Valyrian steel. Euron's Hellhorn. Victarion ran his hand along it. The horn was as warm and smooth as the dusky woman's thighs. Sorry, we couldn't help but laugh at that one there. And so shiny that he could see a twisted likeness of his own features in its depths. Strange sorcerous writings had been cut into the bands that girded it. Valyrian glyphs, Mokoro called them.
So it appears that the horn has at least 3 bands of precious metal, and they've been described individually. There could be more, but I feel like they would have been described if they were bands inscribed with anything. In any case, the first golden band is the one that has the name I am Dragonbinder that we read at the beginning.
The second golden band has the warning, no mortal man shall sound me and live.
It's a very curious use of the word mortal man. Mortal man shall sound me and live. You know, we've thrown out in other episodes the possibility that Victarion or someone is not actually truly mortal. Mortal men, I mean, Mokoro could even not be mortal. Think about this. Mortal men don't survive 10 days floating at sea in general. And Mokoro did that. Also think about Melisandre. Would you call her mortal? She's also a red priest.
Yeah, and she claims she doesn't need to eat or sleep or really drink. She kind of does those things just to keep up appearances. So, I don't know, that doesn't sound mortal to me. But I guess there's also the possibility that they're playing with the term man, and maybe a woman could blow the horn. I'm not sure. That might be too much of a lawyery impression of how it works. But the show is playing with that notion with Daenerys' recent lines, I suppose. So, and of course, there's the chance that Victarion is, because of that strange scene on the boat where he gets this burned arm, that maybe he's something along the lines of Beric or Catelyn, where they're alive and they seem to be somewhat human, but they're clearly not because we saw them die. So with Victarion, we're not as sure, but that has to be considered a possibility.
The third band is of Valyrian steel as well. It says blood for fire, fire for blood. And, you know, perhaps, like I said, perhaps there are more bands, but if anything's written on them, we're in the dark, and I don't think there are.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big hidden thing from us there. But it is predominantly black, and note that the gold bands are described as red gold, not the more common yellow gold. So apart from the Valyrian steel band, the horn is black and red, black with red, rather, precisely the House Targaryen's colors.
It's even possible that rather than the horn being themed with Targaryen colors, it's possible that the Targaryens took the various horns colors for their own sigils colors.
Right, this could be where they got their colors from in the first place.
And their motto, fire and blood.
Yeah, the horn is really old. It might predate them. We don't know. Well, we think it's really old. It seems to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, the horn is definitively stated to be made from an actual dragon's horn. A horn taller than most humans, about 6 feet, I guess. The horn is black, so perhaps it came from a black dragon or a dark-colored dragon, a dragon that had some black in it. This guess is based on the knowledge that Viserions' horns are golden.
Mm-hmm. Of course, though, Drogon is black, but he has red horns. Was Valyrian the Black Dread, however, were his horns black? It seems more likely he's described as that.
Yeah, he might be all black, or maybe he was
black is a huge part of his descriptor. Having black horns would fit in with that, but Drogon is black, red horns. So, you know,
we weren't able to find out what color Rhaegal's horns were. We searched the text, and he's bronze and gold, or bronze and green are his colors. So I guess
green horns, bronze horns.
Yeah, his horns are one of those two. I guess.
I kind of figure bronze.
But the name of the horn itself is kind of interesting too. Just Dragonbinder. Valyrian steel swords are given names too, of course, but none of them have the name etched on it, as far as we know. And it's also kind of like, it makes it sound like it's a standalone. Like if there were lots of these horns, would that one be called Dragonbinder? Dragonbinder, Dragon Summoner, Dragon Controller, like. I guess you could come up with some other creative names, but it seems like kind of straightforward. I don't know. I don't know if we can read it too much into that, but
yeah, it is interesting to think about.
It made me think.
Apparently, though, there are a few other horns out there. For one, we hear tales that Lord Celtigar of Claw Isle has a horn that can summon krakens. Seems to me that that's the horn that the Greyjoy should be using, right? I mean, what are they doing messing with the dragons?
Yeah, they should stay with their own sigil and go ahead and get them a real kraken. That would really make them rule the seas if they could summon krakens. They would totally annihilate the Red Line
the Baratheons are going to rule the kingdom with their stags.
An army of stags.
The Tyrells are going to, the roses are going to cover the kingdom.
I think if all the sigils became real animals and decided to fight, I think Targaryens would come out on top, except for on the sea. The Greyjoys would play in there.
It's true.
I would love to see a kraken pull a dragon underwater.
The sun with a spear through it?
Okay, that's a good point. The sun could actually win over everybody. The sun destroys all.
There's also, though, the broken horn that Ghost and Jon find buried with all the dragon glass weapons in the Night's Watch cloak.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have no idea what that horn does. It's broken. It can't be blown. But the fact that it was stashed with all these other interesting items, well, just the obsidian, which are so important, and the Night's Watch cloak, which is, makes you think maybe there's something to it, but we'll just have to wait on that. We have no idea. But maybe it'll turn out that the simplest looking horn is the one that is the actual magic one. But probably not, because this horn is definitively magic. We just don't know exactly what it's going to do. But the other horn that we have the best description of, the one that helps us do a comparison, since details on the others are pretty scant, is the horn that Mance had in his tent. The one he claimed was the horn of Jormungand, which is supposedly capable of bringing down the wall. Now, we're not going to claim that that's actually what this horn was, or that we know that the horn actually does that, meaning bring down the wall. But Mance said that's what it was. And that horn was 8 feet long, so even longer than Dragonbinder. And it was also black and banded in gold, but no Valyrian steel. The gold on this one is so old that Jon mistook it for bronze at first. But there's also runes on it, not glyphs, and these are apparently runes from the first men. So a couple of theories out there that try to link these two horns, but I'm not seeing it. It just doesn't seem to fit. The only similarity is that they're huge, and they're black, and they're old, and they have some gold. But the gold isn't even the same kind of gold. So it's pretty thin, the connection there. But it's the only other big horn we have, so we want to at least go ahead and do that comparison. So that horn, we don't know where it came from. Like I said, the Dragonbinder apparently comes from an actual dragon's horn. We don't know what kind of creature else could have such a horn that big. So this 8-foot horn that Mance had, where did that come from? If it came from a real creature, I do not know what beast could have 8-foot horns. I mean, that's kind of scary.
Unicorn.
Super unicorn.
Yeah, super unicorn.
Windy horn. Just
in any case, though, this horn is quite thoroughly burned and destroyed.
Thanks, Mel.
So its origin and function quite likely will just remain a mystery.
But we do know a bit more about the origin of Dragonbinder itself, so let's get into that. As far as who made it, we can only guess. As we said earlier, we're told it's carved from the actual horn of a dragon, but it is, however it was created, it's pretty certain that no living person knows how to make a new one. Now, it's pretty safe bet that the Valyrians made it, but when or how is pretty much not available to us at this point. But we can make a few guesses, and there's a couple of details that we can dig pretty deep into and make a few interesting inferences. It does seem like the knowledge of Valyrian steel was lost. There's a few people that know how to make, or rather reshape, Valyrian steel. No one knows how to make it from scratch, as far as we know. So if that knowledge is lost, well, that seems less complicated than this horn. So if no one knows how to make Valyrian steel, then they probably don't know how to make another horn like this.
Yeah.
But maybe. But
yeah, there's probably no one who could even rework the horn. How do you even rework it?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you count claiming it with blood as reworking it. You know,
Yeah.
originally it was bound to the Targaryen blood, and then it was
Yeah.
bound to Euron, and now it's bound to Victorian. But the presence of a Valyrian steel band on it does indicate that the horn was not used it was not made prior to the taming of dragons. Valyrian steel requires dragon flame. So
there you go.
The Valyrian steel bands could have been added after the creation of the horn, but then the horn is made of a dragon. Like, I find it more likely that this is a refined horn that they used, whatever they used to first bind the dragons, whether it was a horn or something else. I feel like this is a refined version made after the domestication of dragons, so to say. So with that in mind, though, you can consider that in the Princess and the Queen excerpts review that we have, which, we did an episode on, by the way.
Check that out
Yeah.
if you haven't, definitely.
It was stated that dragons will only accept and bond with riders of Targaryen blood. Now, I think that we can substitute this with Valyrian, or most Valyrians, the Valyrians that were part of the dragon riding class, rather.
Certainly at least them, yeah. If not
So,
other Valyrians.
In any case, so if we substitute that, we can see where that takes us.
And if you think about the fact that the Targaryens and the Valyrians have been controlling dragons for so long before the Doom, like thousands of years, what Ashay is saying makes a lot of sense as far as calling it, maybe thinking of earlier versions of a horn. Maybe they had their techniques, right? Like a proto horn is a good term. But basically, they developed tools to control dragons over thousands of years, and of course, these methods and tools became more and more refined until all of a sudden, all that was wiped out by the Doom.
So, Dragonbinder, if you think about it being a refined creation, would that mean that it has more of a
Is it stronger or just more powerful?
Stronger? Is it more specific, more particular? Like the Dragonbinder binds it to one person rather than a bloodline, as maybe the earlier horns did. Maybe it binds to all the bloodline.
Or maybe it just blows louder and it reaches farther distances. It could be a more mundane type of improvement.
Yeah.
But all these things are pretty valid guesses.
So will it bind it to one particular person, Victorian or Euron, or to an entire bloodline, Greyjoy, or simply Ironborn?
Now, referring back to the Princess and the Queen again for a minute, that we've only got an excerpt of that, but we've also got knowledge of the Dance of the Dragons outside of that excerpt. And there's no mention of any kind of horns during the Dance of the Dragons or anything like that, or during the early Targaryen era when the Targaryens, after Aegon, who had dragons. No mention of horns at all. So we're pretty sure this horn, or anything like it, was never in Westeros or anything like that. It originated in Essos, and if there's another copy of this horn or something like it out there, that's probably in Essos too. We never hear about that prior to A Feast for Crows, really. Besides, well, that's not true. We have heard about horns. There's vague mentions of horns that a couple of these quotes will be in later in the episode, in fact.
Pretty close.
But none of those things reference anything to do with Westeros. They all refer to Valyria. So what we might be faced with, let's say, as maybe a potential guess to how the horn might work, if claiming it with blood works sort of in the way we're imagining here, we might see Rhaegal and or Viserion switch over to Greyjoy blood. They may be bound to the Greyjoy blood because of the blowing of this horn, if it's really that powerful, and they use it correctly, which of course is no sure thing at all. Now, since Euron is kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes, and we're quite sure that he's going to outwit his brother, even though Victorian kind of has a few things that he's figured out, and of course Makoro being the real wild card there that no one planned for, we are pretty sure that if any Greyjoy is going to ride a dragon, it's still going to be Euron, despite the fact that Victorian's got Makoro now, and that Makoro is possibly going to mess some things up.
Yeah, I mean, of course, though, if Makoro knew that it would work in such a way to, like, bind these dragons to Greyjoy blood, not Targaryen blood, it seems unlikely that he would help Victarion do... Shh! It would help Victarion do something contrary to Daenerys' interests. Sorry about that.
So we suspect the unexpected, you would say. There's no chance of it going really smoothly or ordinarily or just kind of like straight down the middle. We think it's going to be something kind of... George has got something in mind for something clever. So now consider that alongside the horn itself, if Valyrian/Targaryen blood is necessary for bonding with a dragon and indeed allows one to do so, well, why did they need a horn in the first place?
Well, Danny gives us this quote. The dragon lords of old Valyria had controlled their mounts with binding spells and sorcerous horns. Daenerys made do with a word and a whip.
So perhaps the horns were used in conjunction with proper blood, something along those lines. Maybe it's a matter of, well, you got to actually get the dragon to come near you in the first place if you want to tame it. I don't know. Maybe it's just hanging out way, some cliff somewhere. How are you going to get it to come near you and bond with it, whatever that means? Daenerys had to get up close and personal with Drogon, so maybe there's something to that. But Dany's not an expert on dragon lore. That quote she gave us doesn't necessarily mean she knows what she's talking about. She learned everything she learned from Viserys, and Viserys was just a little boy when he fled Dragonstone. Yeah. So it's not like he had a lot of access to dragon lore or learning about these things. So she, and neither he or she can be considered real experts on it. They hopefully will learn a little more in the future. Well, not they. Hopefully she will learn a little more in the future, and she's certainly got some people coming to her that may be able to help with that. But
yeah, Daenerys certainly does seem to have made do. I mean, she's bonded with Drogon, and she has no horn. And we're told dragons never have two riders at a time, nor can riders bond with a second dragon. But when a dragon rider dies, the dragon can bond with someone new. So, perhaps the horn is needed when a dragon gets switched to a new rider. Again, though, we didn't hear about it in the Dance of the Dragons. We didn't hear about it in Westeros, and so I don't really think that they had any horns.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I think we would have heard about that if we had.
Yeah.
So, let's move on to looking at the next bit about the horn itself. Let's take a look at the next quote related to the horn itself.
Oh, yeah, certainly this quote is likely to be relevant as well. Makoro pointed to the band of Valyrian steel. Here, blood for fire, fire for blood. Who blows the Hellhorn matters not. The dragons will come to the horn's master. You must claim the horn with blood.
The Targ words, as we all know, are fire and blood. This might be where Makoro is deliberately misleading the translation or the meaning of the glyphs or the runes. The horn may have the opposite effect that Vic and Euron believe. Perhaps the horn will only work for a Targaryen, as we said. And no matter who blows it, the result may be that it just makes things easier for Dany.
Yeah, maybe
they just become more tractable or whatever.
I hope.
Yeah, probably not, though. We're still going to predict some sort of chaos and some sort of, non-happy, complete happy ending here.
Yeah. A little too easy for George.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that the claim the horn with blood is a good place for Makoro to spin things a bit. I mean, as we pointed out, there are a lot of reasons not to trust Makoro. I mean, for Victarion not to trust Makoro, we think Daenerys should trust him.
Yeah.
But is this something that he needs to lie about? He may be lying about the interpretation of the runes, or about what they actually say. Or maybe he just omitted some key details that will ruin the plan.
Right, like, for example, maybe there's more writing that... We talked about the fact that we've only got 3 of the bands
Maybe the blood for fire, fire for blood is actually saying, that only the fire and blood, only Targaryen.
Maybe there's a 4th band with an asterisk that says, actually, the correct... there's the fine print on the horn. Euron didn't read the fine print, but Makoro did. So here, let's talk a bit more about where it actually came from. Now, is there any chance that Euron's claim that he found it in Valyria, is there any chance that that's accurate?
No. He almost certainly made that up so he could sound like a bigger badass. I mean, Roderick the Reader, the Lord of Harlaw, he openly questions Euron's claim about having gone to Valyria. He's pretty well educated, and the Reader, unlike pretty much the rest of his countrymen. Yeah. So while others might swallow that lie in ignorance, the Reader did not.
No.
Neither did we.
No, neither did we. We're also well-read. Maybe not as well-read as the reader, but
Yeah,
we're
maybe
pretty
not.
well-read.
No,
I mean,
well.
no one's given me a nickname like the reader or the interpreter or anything like that. But I'm not the Lord of Harlaw. So. Remember that he first tells his tale, that's Euron, of going to Valyria during the King's Moot. Of course, he's going to talk himself up and make himself sound like as big a badass as he can. So he's trying to sell himself as the next Ironborn king. So he's going to tell tall tales and make himself sound great. So exaggeration, of course, is something we should predict from that. Now, but the truth, though, is that he probably got it from the Warlocks. The Warlocks, you say?
I do say.
Yes, you do, and I say it too. No, seriously, we're talking about Pyat Pree, as in the one who led Dany to the House of the Undying. We're pretty sure that connection was made, that Euron actually captured Pyat Pree and some of his friends. And he tells us this story of Pyat Pree while trying to get Victarion to drink a suspicious beverage.
Shade of the evening, the wine of the Warlocks. I came upon a cask of it when I captured a certain galley out in Karth, along with some cloves and nutmeg, 40 bolts of green silk, and 4 warlocks who told a curious tale. One presumed to threaten me, so I killed him and fed him to the other 3. Oh, it's dark. Oh.
Well, I mean,
Fed him
have you never eaten warlock before? It's pretty good.
Yeah, he cooked him with the cloves and nutmeg.
And wore the green silk to dinner.
Yeah.
The curious tale, though, that Euron refers to that the Warlocks told him is none other than the reveal that Daenerys and her 3 dragons exist.
Or 3 ferrets.
3 ferrets, that's right. See, Daenerys right here with ferrets. Yeah.
Ferrets.
Of course, as an aside, this probably means Pyat Pree is dead. He was probably the leader referred to that talked back to Euron and got fed to his 3 compatriots.
But where did the Warlocks get it? I mean, it seems they did not have it when they first encountered Dany. Yeah. I mean, we would have seen them use it, probably. I mean, it was the dragons that they wanted all along. Why wouldn't they use the horn that they had? So it seems that they probably acquired it sometime after the destruction of the House of the Undying.
Right. Now, despite what we said earlier about it probably having been made a long time and no one having
during
the
the Age
technology
of
to make it
Valyria,
again. But I guess there's a tiny chance they could have made something like this.
If anyone could make it, it would be them.
Yeah,
or the people in Innistrad, I guess. But
we know, for example, that the skulls in King's Landing of the old dragons are black, so we know that pretty much all dragon skulls are black, if not all dragon skulls are black. They have black teeth and all that. Tyrion reveals that to us from his point of view. So the horn, they could have just gotten a dragon skull from somewhere and, put some bands around it, and I don't know. Who knows? But it really doesn't seem like the Warlocks are, on the level of the old Valyrian sorcerers. So we'll just call that a really an out there kind of theory. We'll call that pretty crackpot.
Yeah, pretty doubtful.
Yeah, doubtful. Yes.
Maybe we're on the wrong track, though.
Yeah, maybe we are. It's possible that Euron got it somewhere besides the Warlocks. Maybe he didn't get it from them. Well, maybe we're just wrong about that. Maybe he just got the tale from them. But where else would that be? Maybe Ashai?
He has a dragon tail?
Maybe Ashai. Ashai makes sense for him to go. Like, Ashai's on the map. It's not some strange legendary place. It's a real city. We don't know a lot about it, but it's certainly real, unlike... Well, Valyria is real, but going there is probably not very real. I mean, no matter how badass you are, Euron... You need oxygen to breathe, and there isn't much of it there.
Yeah, so. I mean, let's not forget that Tyrion's uncle, Jaerion, he tried to settle Valyria, and he just vanished.
Yeah,
he disappeared.
And no one would go with him. He had to hire slaves.
He's the king of Valyria.
Yeah. Now, Euron also had a dragon's egg at one point. Now, that's kind of interesting. It's tempting to consider that he got this from the Warlocks as well. But the timeline doesn't really fit that because he says that he had it for a while. He may have gotten that from Ashai. That makes a lot of sense. We see Bran's vision at the beginning of the books when he's in his coma, and he sees something about dragons under the shadow at Ashai. Now, of course, we're told that Daenerys' dragons are the only living dragons, but there's that vision that Bran has about dragons under the shadow near Ashai. So, if there's any place to get eggs, that might be it.
That's more believable. I mean, he tells Victarion that he hired a Moorish wizard to hatch it. And that the wizard spent much time on it. Euron killed him eventually. He was bored with his excuses. Not only does the timeline, probably not fit, but it's hard to imagine why Euron would lie to conceal that he got the eggs just from the warlocks.
Yeah, what does he care who finds it, knows where he got it from? That doesn't matter. I mean, he's he's a pirate. He stole it from somebody. I mean, of course he did. So the egg, by the way, as a small aside here, the egg is almost certainly how he paid the Faceless Man to kill Balon. Now, we'll get into, if you're not familiar with Euron killing Balon theories, there's how else did Balon or did Euron know that Balon was dead? He shows up the day after. There's no internet. Ravens take far longer than that. He sailed in. I mean, he was at sea when Balon died. So he just happened to return back to a place where he was told never to come back on the day after the guy who.
You know what? I always was curious to me. Like, I can see the benefit of getting in there quick,
Yeah.
But I can also see the benefit of hanging back a week.
Yeah.
It's so. I guess people would still say a week or a day. People would say he came back right then. But I mean, the day after, who could not think that Euron killed Balon?
Yeah, who couldn't? But he wasn't there, so no one can prove it.
Yeah.
So it kind of just makes him seem more dangerous because if he's got these wizards with him, he keeps warlocks with him, all that. It makes people fear him. I mean, they may think that some of his pets have these powers, or that he's got
a Faceless Man with him all the time.
Ooh,
he has one on retainer. We've said it before.
That's a scary thought. Well, that makes him really
but
dangerous.
we can consider this quote as proof that he used the dragon egg to pay the Faceless Man.
Basically, he tells Victarion asks him, "Show me this dragon's egg."
And Euron says, "I threw it in the sea during one of my dark moods."
Now, that proves to us that he killed Balon. Yeah. How might you say that? Well, because Balon was thrown into the sea, and you might think it would take a dark mood to kill your own brother and order his death.
Yes.
But let's be honest, Euron's a pirate. How bad would his mood have to be to literally just throw away an insanely valuable treasure? Remember how we hear early in the stories just how incredibly valuable dragon's eggs are. So really, threw it away? I just don't think so.
He paid the Faceless Men for it, so the Faceless Men have another dragon egg. If maybe they've already gotten paid with some in the past. They're a long-running institution, but they certainly have one now.
That's paying the iron price, right there.
It's funny though that Euron got his Iron Throne starter kit from the warlocks.
Iron Throne starter kit. Nice.
The horn, the knowledge of dragons, and their owner, and their location, and maybe even the egg that he used to pay for his brother's assassination. Maybe. Yeah.
So he may have gotten all that in just one little act of piracy, and all of a sudden he's on his way to the Iron Throne. So let's talk about Euron's plan and the plan for the horn in general. Euron tells us, "The horn you heard I found amongst the smoking ruins that were Valyria." Yeah, right. "Where no man has dared to walk but me. You heard its call and felt its power. It is a dragon horn, bound with bands of red, gold, and Valyrian steel graven with enchantments. The dragon lords of old sounded such horns before the doom devoured them. With this horn, Iron Men, I can bind dragons to my will."
So basically, Victarion intends to go to Slaver's Bay, steal all the dragons with the horn, and steal Dany by force. Simple. Someone has to blow the horn. We know it won't be Victarion or Euron itself. Victarion arranges for some thralls to do it. A bastard's bastard and a brute.
And a boy?
And a boy, yeah. A boy, a brute, and a bastard's bastard.
Bunch of bees.
B. Anyways, he's pretty sure, we're pretty sure that blowing the horn causes death. So after that, Euron apparently expects to ride a dragon, defeat the Lannisters, Tyrells, and whoever else resists him and win the Iron Throne.
All simple. Thanks to that one ship carrying the warlocks. All there. Wow. Nice plan, Euron. Good luck with that.
Yes.
But as we pointed out earlier, Moqorro agrees that blowing the horn is death, so we're pretty sure about that. Telling Victarion, "Your brother did not sound the horn himself, nor must you." The horn has a shred of one ring power, kind of lust going for it. This is kind of interesting. Victarion refuses to let Moqorro handle it alone. He doesn't really trust him with it. And there is this very curious passage that really got us thinking. He brushed his hand across one of the red gold bands, and the ancient glyph seemed to sing beneath his fingertips. For half a heartbeat, he wanted nothing so much as to sound the horn himself. "Euron was a fool to give me this. It is a precious thing and powerful. With this I'll win the Seastone Chair, and then the Iron Throne. With this I'll win the world."
Whoa. What? Where did this ambition come from? He wanted to sit the Seastone Chair. Yeah. Sure. He put his name forth at the Kingsmoot after all. But not long ago, Victarion didn't seem to be big on the horn and dragons. he was more interested in Daenerys and getting revenge on Euron through her, but now he's thinking about conquering the world. Like, the world.
That's like, what?
Not naming. He's thinking about conquering the Iron Throne. That's already a jump. But the world?
Yeah.
This will conquer the world?
Like, he really just, something's up with that, I think.
You guys need to survey the world first. You know everything here.
We've got the maps, and it doesn't show us the whole
No.
world. I mean, it doesn't at all. So, seems to sing beneath his fingertips.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just... Victarion is not, like, this flowery, wordy guy that speaks in poetry. So that's just like, there's something happening there. I mean, and he's tempted to blow it. That's the craziest thing about this. I mean, he thinks of, he's got this temptation to blow it right after, or even during, telling some other people about how blowing it will kill them. So he's like, it's going to kill people who blow it, but I'm tempted to blow it. Like, that's just insane, right? Like, and Victarion's a superstitious, kind of fears magic. He's kind of like, you know, worries about that kind of thing. So it doesn't seem like he would just be gung-ho about this. So I really feel like something is happening. Like, there's something beyond just his own ambition, his own lust for power. It's interesting.
It's crackpot theory that, you know, maybe the reason Euron became so ambitious is the same thing that's affecting Victarion right now. Horn, you know, perhaps is possessing them.
And possible, but a possible problem with that is that, you know, Euron did, after all, give the horn to Victarion's possession to go ahead and do with what he did with it. So,
Dan, he was really ambitious in the first place.
yeah, he seems to have already been kind of ambitious. So I don't know. We're not positive that the horn has some sort of possession thing going on with it, but it's the text is it goes beyond just normal. You know, this is a powerful item. I can do something with it. It seems to be a little beyond that. So keep an eye on that. But Makoro also could be pulling some strings. You know, he's already enchanted, for lack of a better word, Victarion's left arm up to the elbow. It's got that burning, cracking thing. It's smoking. I mean, he can do that. Why not, you know, some sort of manipulation or some sort of control over Victarion? I don't know. That's possible. Could be more to this. This is the ritual that gave Victarion the hand. Maybe there was something else to it. Maybe he also got, you know, some sort of control over Victarion. I don't know. Maybe that's why Victarion has the urge to blow the horn. You know, Victarion has king's blood, so maybe someone like him blowing it would have a big effect. I don't know. Maybe it's foreshadowing of that. Maybe he will blow it. I don't know why he would do that, but he's tempted to.
Yeah, he's tempted to. So on top of Makoro's string pulling, there's also the Dusky Woman, who is probably an agent of Euron.
Yeah.
We discuss her and the possibility that she was contributing to the infection of Victarion's hand in our Battle of Fire episode. So, yeah, you should check that. If you're watching this episode and you haven't watched that, I don't know why you wouldn't watch that episode.
Yeah, it's one of our best.
The other possibility is that it was the weakling. I like that you added in, an insult there. The weakling, Maester Kerwin, who is keeping Victarion's hand from healing. But the Dusky Woman seems more likely. I mean, if in fact one of them is indeed responsible.
Now, there's other reasons for Euron to want Victarion dead. He certainly needed Victarion to lead the Iron Fleet. They're used to him being the captain, and Euron's kind of a new king. His power isn't necessarily settled. Even no matter how much they yelled for him at the Kingsmoot, they weren't excited about this whole go to Slaver's Bay and get the Dragonhorn and the dragons thing. That was not really their thing. They were like, why do that? We can go conquer the Arbor and sail up the Mander. Let's attack Westeros. They're not as creative or lofty with their ambitions. Yeah, they're not. That's right. So, but on the other hand, I don't think Euron would want Victarion dead before he completes this mission. It seems like he's kind of using Victarion, but he needs Victarion in a sense to kind of, take the heat and do this dirty work. So
Dusky Woman could have been doing the infection on her own, as we said in the other episode.
Right. Now, so there's a couple of possibilities there. Or the infection could just be an infection that was troubling, and there doesn't have to be any sneaky thing going on there.
And she could still be a spy.
Right. They could both be true. There's just because...
Whatever.
I mean, Euron gave her to him, so, I mean, he didn't just give him a gift. Come on, this is Euron. This guy's just a master manipulator, so... but a big question, probably the biggest question, the question we've been building up to this whole episode is what's going to happen if the horn actually works, or in general, what's going to happen with it? What if it works? Let's start with the simplest thing. What happens if it works kind of according to our simplest explanation, or expectations, rather?
Yeah, I mean, Dany, ultimately, she wants to protect her children. And so if the horn works for Victarion and or Euron, and one or two of her dragons head off with the Iron Fleet, or just head off in general, she will have a really, really difficult decision to make. Meereen needs to be settled and safe for those she freed and allied with. She calls them her children. There are also her children. But if it isn't, can she, afford to stay behind until it is? If someone has stolen her dragons, that could be the incentive that she needs to go to Westeros. Her dragons have been stolen.
Finally, the thing that gets her moving.
Yeah. Unless she has no way to pursue the Iron Fleet, she'll probably choose her dragons over Meereen. They were her first children and her most powerful children.
It'd be a tough decision, but I think I agree. That's where she should go.
But that does seem a little unlikely. Again, Moqorro was sent by the head priest of the Red Temple.
Benero.
Yeah, who is 100% devoted to Daenerys.
Yeah.
These are religious people who believe Daenerys is Azor Ahai, their savior. Moqorro is not going to stand by and allow Daenerys' cause to suffer harm. So I think he's going to pull a maneuver.
A maneuver. I think really... Moqorro or Benero not being behind Dany is kind of like the Pope not being behind Jesus. It's that simple, really. They believe she's the actual savior of the world. There's just no room for doubt there.
Maybe they had a vision. The only way to get her to Westeros was to take her dragons.
Ha! Wow, they may manipulate her into doing the right thing. That's definitely possible. We can't expect that. They may toy with her. They may try to get her to do the right thing.
Either way, it's maneuver to benefit Daenerys.
Right. And to save the world, of course. That's what, ultimately that's what
they don't really care about
Daenerys
as long as she fulfills her purpose. They don't care about her at all, I don't think.
And the simplest thing Moqorro could do, I suppose, is just to steal the horn and give it to Daenerys or get it blown somewhere. You'd have to kill Victarion, I suppose, to do that. And he's not in a position to do that at the moment because he's on a ship at sea surrounded by other Ironborn.
Not for long.
That's not going to happen at least till he gets to shore. So we'll wait and see on that. Remember, though, we talked about this a little earlier, the notion of Victarion maybe being dead. We talked about this in the Battle of Fire episode also, but just a quick tidbit on that. Remember, Victarion's point of view shifts from his inner monologue to a narrator during that scene where he's getting his new burned arm. And that's part of why we think he might not be living, or maybe maybe Moqorro just ensorcered him somehow put a spell on him.
That's true.
Here we are talking about how there's not a lot of magic in the series, and we're talking about him being controlled or something like that. But of course, we know that magic is going
items.
Not a lot of magic items. Moqorro is not an item. He's a person.
His arm isn't really a magic item either.
An arm is not an item. That's true.
Jaime's arm is.
Jaime, a golden hand.
Yeah. Yes. The horn, though, might not be so foreign in concept or intended use to someone like Moqorro or, say, Marwyn the Mage. He's on his way there, especially given our thoughts on why Moqorro could be lying or at least distorting the truth.
Yeah.
So Tyrion, though, is another person who should at least know a few things on the subject. He certainly is very well read on dragons in general, and I'm sure he has seen... If Daenerys has heard sorceress horns, I feel like it's likely that Tyrion has heard mention of horns.
I'd be really surprised if Tyrion doesn't at least have some familiarity with the horn. He's had to have read a few things about it.
But now consider that Volantis was founded by the Valyrians and has never been destroyed or conquered by outsiders. There's bound to be some knowledge, written or no, about dragons and dragon horns and the like. Giant game of telephone if it's not written.
Now, we can't use Westeros as a great example of how much dragon knowledge there should be out there, because that knowledge would have been brought by the Targaryens, and maybe some of it would have been relearned. But there was a guy named Septon Barth who was made Hand of the King by Jaehaerys. Now, Septon Barth wrote a lot about dragons. He knew a lot about dragons and wrote a lot about it. Sadly, Baelor the Blessed, also known as Baelor the Befuddled, Baelor the First, he considered Barth's writings to be heretical and had them gathered and burned. So whatever great knowledge we had in Westeros is destroyed. But consider what Ashea was just saying about the collected writings in Volantis. There has to be something that survived there. Volantis was never destroyed, never conquered, never sacked, nothing like that. There's these inner walls, there's the outer walls, and then there's the inner walls. And the inner walls is where the old blood lives. And they've probably got some old scrolls, some old knowledge passed down from family to family. Certainly some old books, I would think. There's probably something in there that can tell us more. And I've got to think that some of that information filtered into the Red Temple as well. Some of those guys got hold of some of that knowledge. So it's really not a stretch at all to think that they would have some of that information themselves.
Yeah, who else? I mean, think about how much they would care about that. The Red God. Of
really
course they care about dragons.
Yeah,
of course
it's got to be super important.
So if you're the high priest of the Red Temple and you're sending a representative to the person you consider to be the savior, and that savior has dragons, I think you'd choose someone that had, some subject matter expertise.
Yeah,
I think if one person in all of the temple knows about dragons, which is unlikely, I think more than one person would. If one person has a lot of knowledge, you would send that one person.
Yeah, the one that's the biggest expert, that's also the most competent in other areas. So, and if not, you'd educate that person you'd have the guy that knows the most about dragons educate the one that's going to be going in there and doing the job. So. Now, if the timeline were a little different, things could go a lot smoother. It's kind of fun to think about that. Several people who know a lot about dragons and dragonhorns, like we're saying, Marwyn and Makoro himself and Tyrion, if these people were to just get there a little sooner, they could prepare Daenerys for what might be about to happen. But it looks like Victorian is getting there first. He's outracing all these helpers. So that's just not going to happen, I don't think.
So the education on horns and dragons may have to focus on topics like how to steal back a dragon, the newest movie in theaters, and how to undo the effects of a dragon.
It would be the sequel of How to Tame Your Dragon, how to steal it back, or How to Train Your Dragon, how to steal back your dragon.
Yes. How to undo the effects of a dragon horn, I hope they know how to do that.
Yeah, we'll see, otherwise But if not, or even if so, maybe it happens later. The bottom line seems to be that a second Dance of the Dragons has been foreshadowed in numerous places in the text. Partly just because the first one has been referred to so many times, and George has shown a lot that history repeats itself. We've got a ton of parallels. Yeah,
he wanted to write The Princess and the Queen.
Yeah, anybody.
He put off the She-Wolves of Winterfell for that.
Just for that, it's true. Anyone who's followed our podcast for a while has probably noticed that there's tons of parallels. You take things that happen back in history, in the timeline of Westeros, you're going to find a lot of those things kind of repeat themselves in the timeline of the 5 books. So a lot of the history that we actually put through the show is actually foreshadowing. So we really feel strongly that there's going to be another Dance of the Dragons, but you can't take that literally. There's already one kind of being set up. Aegon and Daenerys. That's a bit of a Dance of the Dragons of itself.
Yeah,
but
figurative.
It's a figurative one because Aegon doesn't have a dragon, but he is figuratively is a dragon.
Or there's a literal dance where Euron or Victorian get a dragon, and the Mother of Dragons is forced to ride her child Drogon into battle against one of her other children. Now, that would be hard.
That would be really heartbreaking. It would be kind of terrible, but it could
be both.
It could be the most likely thing. Because it's so terrible. That might be why we should be predicting it. But we'll just have to see.
Yes. So, thank you for listening. Or watching. As
or both.
As it happens. Time to say our standard outro,
Yes, our standard outro that we love so much.
Yes.
We're on Facebook, of course. Check us out there. Give us a like. We occasionally post some fun tidbits there.
That's facebook.com/Westeros History.
Yep.
We're on YouTube. If you're watching it, If you're not, you can on YouTube. Our name is AA Podcast because YouTube is Yeah, never mind. We're AA Podcast. We're AA Podcast. Or you can search for History of Westeros. You should find us. Yeah, you should find us. We're on Twitter, twitter.com/Westeros History. Yep. Gmail, WesteroShistory@gmail.com. We're on Tumblr, historyofwesteros.tumblr.com. Yes. Now, we're on iTunes. That's a big one. Please, if you do listen to us on iTunes, or even if you don't mind heading over there, give us a rating. That's really important for us. And if you would be so generous, you could help us out with a donation to help keep us going, to pay for our costs of technology and the website that we're building. And it's pretty close to done. It's looking pretty good. Yeah, it is looking really good. We can't wait to show it to you guys. We're going to have a lot of tools for searching through some of our data and through our episodes, some essays, link to some other sources, other websites that we find valuable. Speaking of those, some thanks to some of our friends and other sources. Of course, Westeros.org and Tower of the Hand are the big ones. But also some of our friends on the Westeros.org forums. Thomas, a.k.a. Lord Varys, gave us some help with this one. A couple of his insights were really valuable to coming up with some of the theories in this episode. So shout out to him. And any other people that posted theories and ideas for the Dragonhorn. We may have picked up on some of those things. A lot of this we came up on our own, but a lot of it we did from reading and pulling other people's theories together and refining them and kind of making them our own. But credit where credit's due, even though we don't have all your names here, you know who you are. So yeah, we're sorry this episode is out a day late. We got a new kitten on Saturday, as you saw in the video. If you're watching the video, you saw her. She's so cute. Her name is Koja Mo, after Koja Mo, the archer in the Cinnamon Wind. But yeah, we got her, and we just really underestimated just how cute she would be, and she kept me up all night. I couldn't leave her alone, and anyways. She won't be so cute in 2 weeks. It won't be delayed again. Okay. Anyways, thanks for listening. We're History of Westeros podcast.
See you next time.
Yes.